A new study from the American Cancer Society finds a shocking rise in 17 cancers among members of Gen X and millennials when compared to older generations.
Okay, turning now to an alarming health trend. This is important. A new report released by the American Cancer Society Tuesday is revealing that breast cancer diagnoses are on the rise, especially among younger women.
What is really alarming oncologists is this sharp rise in cancer incidence among young people.
They analyzed data from millions of cancer patients born between 1920 and 1990.
But in a cellular pH of 5.5, this is where disease thrives, especially yeasts, funguses, and cancer.
In this video, we'll gain insights from Barbara O'Neill, a renowned health educator from Australia, known globally for her emphasis on the body's innate healing abilities. The spotlight of this video is on the conditions that foster cancer cells, particularly how an acidic body might create a conducive environment for these cells. Barbara will explain why foods that nudge the body towards a slightly more alkaline state could potentially safeguard against cancer.
So welcome back, everyone, where we're going to be having a look at the other #1 killer in the world today. We looked at heart disease, strokes, the #1 killer, but there's another one that's neck to neck, and that is cancer. And never have cancer rates have been what they are today. And my husband believes that in another 20, hopefully 10 years, we're going to look back on today and consider that medicine was in the dark ages concerning cancer. Because the fact is that chemotherapy might kill off cancer, and I'll show you how it does it in a minute, but it also kills off, totally obliterates your immune system, and it's your immune system that's in the body given by God to fight disease, and it also kills off many good cells. And I've had too many people come to me and say, 10 years ago, I had breast cancer. They took my breast, they gave me chemotherapy, radiotherapy, and said I was totally healed. And yet 2 years after that, I got bone cancer. They did more chemotherapy, radiotherapy. And then 2 years later, I got brain cancer and liver cancer. Were they totally healed? No. And this lady said to me, it was very sad because when she came to us, she was in advanced stages. She said, I did not want to do this. My gut feeling was against this, but my family pressured me. Now, why did the family pressure her? Yeah. And they love her. And you know what else? They don't know any other way. And it just amazes me how much faith people put in the medical profession, people put into doctors. Oh, if only that faith were put into God. Because God is the healer. Put not your trust in princes, neither in the Son of Man, in whom there is no help. His breath goes forth, he returns unto his earth. In that very day his thoughts perish. In other words, that prince, that authority, do you know, a car could knock him over tomorrow and he could die. Happy is he that hath the God of Jacob as his help, who is the first and the last and forevermore. Happy is he that hath the God of Jacob as his help. His hope is in the Lord his God that made heaven, earth, sea, and the waters, who keeps truth forever. That's what he does. And he also, the Bible says, opens the blind eyes. And many are in blindness as to the truth on the human body, on how it heals, and in the true healing modalities. So let's have a look, as we look at cancer, that it's important to understand what cancer loves, because when we understand what cancer loves, we don't want to give it that. And I have many books in my library at home, many by doctors, scientists, professors, naturopaths, herbalists, nutritionists that have conquered cancer. So my interest is, what have they done? What have they done to bring about healing? And I have found three common denominators. Cancer loves glucose. In fact, it consumes 15 times the glucose of any other cell. Cancer loves an environment where there is no oxygen. And cancer loves an acid environment. And so let's turn that over the other way. What does cancer hate? Sorry. Cancer hates. That's what we want to give the body an environment where cancer cannot thrive. So what does it hate? No or low glucose. And cancer cannot live in the presence of oxygen. A lady said to me, Barbara, did you know that there's a group of scientists in the US that are doing tests on cancer, and they're discovering that cancer cannot live in an oxygenated environment, and that cancer, it can't live where there's low oxygen and low glucose. I said, well, I'm very glad that they're looking at that. But did you know that in 1946, Dr. Otto Warburg got a Nobel Prize for discovering that? So this is not new. And cancer hates an alkaline environment. So let's go over to the cell and have a look at the energy cycles in the cell. And I'm going to show you where the part in the cell that's consuming high glucose and no oxygen. Do you remember we looked at the glucose going in, and it goes through a 20-step pathway, and that 20-step pathway gives us 2 units of energy, and this pathway is no oxygen. And this pathway is a fast pathway, consuming huge amounts of glucose. The end result is the chemical form of glucose called pyruvate. And pyruvate, as the chemical form of glucose, gets fed into what's called the powerhouse of the cell. It's the mitochondria, or the Krebs cycle inside the mitochondria. It's an 8-step pathway. It uses oxygen, and it gives 36 units of energy. Looking at that cell, can you see where cancer lives? Cancer thrives in this section of the cell where it's consuming high amounts of glucose and not using any oxygen.
Is that glucose the same like fruit?
That glucose can come from anywhere. But doesn't every cell use glucose? Yes. But because this is a slow pathway, it can wait for the glucose from the carrot and from the broccoli and from the lentils and the nuts and the seeds. But this one, it consumes high amounts. And Dr. Holland, who writes with Doug Kaufman in the book, The Germ That Causes Cancer, Dr. Holland said, you deprive cancer cells of glucose, they self-destruct because they depend on high amounts. And this is how chemotherapy works. So the cancer cell will consume 15 times the glucose of any other cell. The cancer cell will consume 15 times the chemotherapy of other cells. But there are other cells that are killed because of the chemotherapy. I met a lady once. She had a tumour so large it was blocking her colon. She had chemotherapy. It shrunk the It shrunk the tumour. Then she came to our retreat and learned what she could do. But what we want to do is we want to get in early before it even develops to that. I find that the people that do survive chemo are the people that get it early and the people who change their lifestyle. But I find, as the first story I told you about the lady who had the chemo for her breast cancer, surgery, radiotherapy, 3 months later, the doctor said she was cured. But what happened 2 years later? If you don't turn the tap off, you're still going to be mopping up in the other corner. So that brings me to something else, especially with endocrine cancers, which are hormonal cancers. The other day we looked at how high estrogen, and remember what estrogen is, it's a cell proliferator. It causes massive cell growth. And the Cancer Foundation in Australia has declared that estrogen is a known human carcinogen because it causes this massive cell growth. And that's why a hormone factor is always part of prostate cancer, breast cancer, ovarian cancer, cancer of the uterus. Any hormonal cancers, one must look at the hormone factor. And remember, we looked at mother hormone, which is progesterone. You boost progesterone through the natural yam cream, and mother hormone will automatically bring estrogen back to the level that it should be. The amount of women that have developed breast cancer or uterine cancer or ovarian cancer in their 50s after being on the pill in their 20s. And yet that link is never ever told to the woman. And so this is one aspect that must always be addressed, whether it be a man with prostate cancer or whether it be a woman with uterine, ovarian or breast cancer, is the balance of the hormones. How long would it take to balance the hormones? At least 1 year. And usually a bottle of the yam cream can last three months. I talked to a lady recently. She said, I've got ovarian cancer. I've been on the cream for a year. I said, so how many jars did you use in the year? She said, I'm still on the first jar. She's not taking enough. No wonder there's not an effect. And when we looked at natural remedies, we looked at another one, and that is the castor oil compresses. So the castor oil can be used on the breast. It can be used on the abdomen for uterine or ovarian cancer. And the key is consistency. What about for a man with prostate cancer? Then that man can use a suppositories because the colon wall is very close to the prostate. So this is the easiest way to do it. And to make the suppository, it's 50% castor oil, and that is mixed with 50% coconut oil. And the coconut oil is melted, they're mixed together, and then that liquid is poured into the fingers of a disposable glove. The gloves are tied off at the base, and then that's put in the freezer till it's solid, and then one finger is cut off and it's peeled, and that's inserted into the anus. And where it's inserted into the anus, that's very close to the prostate gland. So let me show you. Here's the scrotum of a man, and here is the anus, and the prostate sits about there. So when the man inserts the suppository here, can you see as it melts, it goes straight across through to the prostate. So that's the easiest way to, it's very difficult to to apply a poultice there, but if you use the suppository, then the castor oil can go across. The black castor oil is a little stronger, but we've seen people get results even with the clear castor oil. Another, and this is for the prostate, for uterine, ovarian, is the sitz baths. And the sitz baths can be done at least once a day, ideally twice. But I do understand if someone's working, if someone's very busy, the twice a day can be difficult. And that's, remember, 3 minutes hot, 30 seconds ice cold, and that's usually done 3 times in a row. At least once a day, you do the sitz baths, and ideally the suppositories at least 5 nights a week. And the compresses at least 5 nights a week. But one lady with breast cancer, she said, I wear it 24/7. I said, go for it. You've got nothing to lose. One lady said, is this safe? Does anyone ever ask if the chemotherapy is safe? One lady came to us and she was in her last days. She was only 40. She said, I'm just here to get a nice little break. She said, they put me on chemotherapy for palliative care. I said, do you know what palliative care is? It's making the last days more comfortable. This is not making the last days more comfortable. Diarrhea, vomiting, hair falling out. She said, you're right. I said, I can't tell you what to do, but I know what I would do. I would stop because it's a toxic poison. It's cytotoxic. You know what that means? Poisonous to cells. Yes, we want to kill the bad guys, but it also kills the good guys. Whereas we live in an incredible body with an inbuilt ability to heal itself, and it will heal itself when you give it the right conditions. So working with the body is important. But I also must stress that we must listen. If you're bleeding from the vagina, if you're bleeding through a man as he urinates, if you're bleeding from the colon, the body's saying, excuse me, there's a problem. Can you do something? And unfortunately, many people do nothing, and then by the time they are discovered that there is a tumour or something, then it's quite advanced. Bleeding in between menstruation, it all depends. Because some women, when they start to go on the yam cream, they might experience that. It's an indication that it's part of balancing back the hormones. And even with the yam cream, there's a little bit of feeling your way with it. For some women, well, we find for most women, the amount that is advised on the bottle is just the right amount. But some might need a little more, some might need a little less. But if everything's going well, then that is good. So these are some specifics for hormonal cancers. So I'd like to quote Dr. Colin Campbell. And Dr. Colin Campbell wrote the book, The China Study. And he was asked to go to the Philippines because children were dying from liver cancer between 8 and 10 years of age. Now, usually this liver cancer only happens in often an alcoholic in his 60s, 70s. So they went to investigate and they found the common denominator. You might like this and you might not like it. It was peanut butter. Now, I know my daughter Emma never liked this because she always was a lover of peanut butter. But what they found is every single jar of peanut butter had a a mould waste in it, and the mould is aspergillus. And the mould waste that they found in the peanut butter was aflatoxin. And aflatoxin is the mould waste that causes liver cancer. Now, what he presumed was that the wealthy children wouldn't be dying, but the poorer children would be. So imagine his surprise when he found that the poorer children were living and the wealthy children were dying, and the only difference was diet. The poorer children were eating a lot of plants, they were eating a little bit of fish, they were eating a little bit of tofu, but lots of greens. Whereas the city children were eating what Time magazine called the sweet meat diet. High meat, high dairy product, and high refined sugars and refined grains. They were the ones that were dying. Now, Colin Campbell scratched his head because as a doctor, he was taught you need meat for protein and milk for calcium. That's about all the nutrition that he learned as a doctor. And so the book's called The China Study because an emperor in China got cancer and he wanted a study done of the whole of China, and that's what they found, that it was the city children that were dying. And so Colin Campbell did a whole lot of experiments on this. So he got 20 rats one day and he injected them all with aflatoxin. 10 of the rats he gave 20% animal protein, 10 of the rats he gave 5% animal protein. On human comparison, 20% animal protein would be meat and dairy every meal. 5% animal protein would be a very small amount, maybe a little bit of yogurt and, a very small piece of meat once a day. So rats live 2 years and their digestive tract is very similar to humans, so they can see what would happen to humans in 70 years would happen to the rats in 2 years. At the end of 2 years, the rats on the 20% animal protein were all dead or dying of liver cancer. But the ones on 5% animal protein diet, none of them had liver cancer, yet they'd all been injected with aflatoxin. You see, we are exposed to environmental poisons, yes, but also yeasts and fungus and molds. It's actually what it finds in the body. Is it going to get well fed or is it going to get starved so it can't multiply in the body? So he did another experiment, 20% animal protein, 5% animal protein, 20% vegetable protein, and injected all the rats with aflatoxins. The ones on the 20% animal protein had no cancer. The ones with 5% animal protein, no cancer, but the ones with 20% animal protein, cancer. He made the statement that he has never in all his research seen something so black and white. He said he could literally switch cancer on and off by the amount of meat and animal products he was giving to those rats. And as a result, he stopped eating meat and animal products because of what he discovered. He said, I grew up on a farm. We ate meat every meal. We ate dairy every meal. But he said, what I saw in the Philippines, he said, that just changed me. And all his friends said to him, you're taking all the fun out of life. He said, I'm in my 70s now, my late 70s. I'll tell you what fun is. Half my friends are dead. The other half are struggling on walking sticks, rattling as they walk because they're on so many medication. And he said, and yet I'm climbing mountains with my grandchildren. I tell you what fun is. Fun is feeling good all the time. I'm not just interested in long life, I'm interested in quality of life. Long life is no fun if the last 20 years of your life you're in pain and you're miserable. And so Dr. Colin Campbell, he gave another aspect to cancer. I have another book in the library, and it's by a Dr. Tullio Simoncini. He's an Italian oncologist who was getting 90% success rate with cancer because he was injecting via a portacath sodium bicarbonate straight into the cancer. What does sodium bicarbonate do to acid? It's the ultimate alkalizer. In fact, 10 years ago, he had little clips up on YouTube where he'd put the camera in and show the lung cancer. It'd sort of be like a white growth with a little scope. Then he'd inject the sodium bicarbonate and you could actually see the cancer shrinking up. You see, the cancer cannot survive when it gets that wave of alkalinity because it thrives in acid. It was actually that simple. But then the pharmaceutical companies came after him because you can't patent sodium bicarbonate. Apparently one of his patients died, so he was put into jail on a charge of manslaughter and all his qualifications have been taken away from him. My husband said if only he'd injected them with chemotherapy, he wouldn't be in jail. Is that right? How many die from chemotherapy? And yet there's no accountability there. So I'm very sorry to hear that. I come under a lot of attack because it is claimed that I'm quoting a disgraced oncologist. He is not disgraced in my eyes. I believe that he was unfairly treated. But his book is called Cancer is a Fungus, because he said in every case of cancer, he found either in lesser or greater amounts some sort of yeast or candida. I have another book in my library by a German, he's a professor called Professor Constantini, and he was former head of the World Health Organization Department of Mycology. What's the Department of Mycology? Mycology is the study of fungus. So myco basically means fungus. And he has written 3 books. One's called The Garden of Eden Diet. Another one's called Breast Cancer, Hope at Last. And he has a 3rd book on prostate. And in his book, he has 30,000 research papers to prove the link between cancer and fungus. I am not a researcher, but in my book, Self-Heal by Design, you'll notice that I quote all of these authors. And so you can search that out for yourself. I have another book called Clinical Mycology, which is a medical textbook on the study of fungus. And every chapter shows the link between fungus and different diseases. If you go to a medical dictionary and look up myco, you'll find page after page after page. And it acknowledges in there that leprosy is a fungus. So how does fungus get into the body? In 4 ways. It can get into your body through inhalation. It can get into your body through the skin. Don't touch it. It can get in your body through ingesting it. If you've got strong hydrochloric acid, it can wipe it out, but not many people have that. And it can also be sexually transmitted. So that's how it can get into your body. Now, this story was in the newspaper, and I met a lady who knew the wife of the man that this happened to. 3 men, they're in Queensland. There's a silo, where the grain's stored, and all the grain went mouldy because there was a leak in the roof. So the grain was taken out, the pigs wouldn't eat it, nothing would eat it. Isn't that interesting? They even covered it in molasses, they still wouldn't eat it. They ended up having to bury it. But this silo, the whole of the inside of the silo was white. What was the white? It was mould. 3 men were sent in to clean it up. They stood and looked. 2 of the men said, we're going to get some covering for this. The 3rd man said, I don't need covering. We can get this done in a flash. The two men went, and when they came back, they looked like they're about to walk on Mars or the moon or something like that. They opened the door and they ran in. There was their friend. He was dead. When he put the shovel in, do you call it a shovel? Into the side, the dust came up, went into his skin. He breathed it in, he swallowed it, and his body had an anaphylactic response to this massive onslaught of poison, and he died. This is toxic stuff. And that's why I've written a book on it, because I find it's an area that many people don't realise. So is all cancer caused by a fungus? Well, not necessarily so. But as Dr. Tullio Simoncini found, that there was a factor in just about every case. And so the million-dollar question is, how do we get it out of the body? A person can have fungus in their body and not have cancer. But if it's well fed, it'll certainly develop into it. So how does it get out of your body? Number one, you have to starve it. So what's its favourite food? And if you're not going to give it sugar, it'll happily accept all the glucose from your fruit. So when someone comes to us with cancer, we suggest they have no fruit for 6 weeks. They can eat lots of vegetables, legumes, nuts and seeds. I said to one man, how are you finding the diet? He said, I love it, I'm alive. It's just 6 weeks. Also, one must check that there is no exposure to mould. We had the very sad story of a lady that came to us, only 33, with 3 little children with breast cancer. And as she was hearing about the link between fungus and cancer, she put her head down. And we said, what's the matter? She said, my house. She said, this is the sunny side of the house. She said, there are big gum trees, you know, gum trees are eucalyptus trees, all around the house. Her bedroom's here. Her wardrobe is there and the ensuite is there. And she said, with the wardrobe, it's all the shoes go mouldy, all the belts, leather belts go mouldy, because there's no sun coming in here at all. So this is what would be for you the southern side. So the children's rooms were here. One of the children's rooms here. The bathroom was here, but the sun's coming in here, the sun's coming in there, and the sun's going through to that bathroom, and the wardrobe's not next to it, so it wasn't a problem for the children. And her husband's at work all day, and she's cleaning the house, and every time she sees the mould, she wipes it, and when she wipes it, the dust comes up and it's going into her. And the worst thing you can put on mould is bleach. You combine bleach and mould and you get an incredibly toxic combination. So what do you kill bleach with? White vinegar. You put bleach on mould and you'll feed the next crop of mould, because bleach kills mould and feeds fungus, and fungus is one stage before mould. She rang up her husband. She said, I can't go back home. She said, it's the house. And because she kept the house so lovely and clean, he didn't even realise what a problem it was. But because she was the one constantly cleaning it, she's got constant exposure to it. The very sad story is that that lady didn't make it. It was a very advanced stage when she came to us. She didn't know about the hormone link. She didn't know about the fungus link. Many are sick through ignorance. And in the little book, Ministry of Healing, she says the only hope of better things is the education of people in right principles. Also, fungus is an opportunist organism. It's there to clean up waste. So if you're not drinking enough water, and if you're not exercising enough and waste is building up your body, there's another field for fungus to grow. So it can be in many bodies for many different reasons and in many different ways. Another waste that the fungus can clean up is heavy metals and chemicals coming into the body. That's why all of that has to go. We had one lady, her name was Elizabeth Cott. Amazing story. She came to us 8 years ago with 3 tumours in her abdomen. It's probably nearly 10 years ago now. And she was in her 60s then. And she didn't like what the doctor was offering. And the doctor said, "You've got to do chemo immediately." But she decided not to. She came to our health retreat. And at the health retreat, she went through the program of no yeast, no sugars. We gave her lots of vegetables. We showed her all the delicious things you can do with vegetables, all the delicious things you can do with legumes. We also gave her herbs. There are herbs that will kill fungus and won't kill you. Isn't that good news? And my book lists them. There's olive leaf extract. There's also grapefruit seed extract. There's also oregano essential oil. Start lightly. There's a South American herb called pordiaco. Garlic is a strong one, but don't use all your ammunition at once. Do a week on this one, a week on that one, a week on that one, a week on that one, because the microorganisms have the ability to adapt and adjust. So every week you change the herbs. Also, while she was at our retreat, she had certain treatments that would help to alkalize. We gave her green drinks. And green drinks, I've got the recipe in my book. I call it the Great Green Drink. We gathered wild greens, blended it with water, strained it, and she drank 3 to 4 glasses of that through the day. If you don't have a garden, you can buy barley green or green barley or super greens. You can buy chlorophyll. Anything green alkalizes the tissues. Now, we didn't have this at the time, but we have it now. It's a hyperbaric chamber. And I know that Eden Valley, which is in Denver, Colorado, they have a couple of hyperbaric chambers. A hyperbaric chamber puts oxygen into the body under pressure. So it's oxygenating, which is automatically alkalizing. We also gave her sodium bicarbonate wraps. Now, we are not doctors. We don't inject sodium bicarbonate in through a portacath, but we soaked towels in sodium bicarbonate, wrung them out, hot towels, and wrapped her whole body in them. And you can Google Barbara O'Neill sodium bicarbonate wraps and you'll see it demonstrated. We gave her one of those a day. And with her body all wrapped up in these hot towels infused with sodium bicarbonate, the pores open and it helps to alkalize the tissues. When Elizabeth heard the lecture, she said to me, "I was the dessert maker at church." She said, "I'm Polish. We love our desserts." And I would make a meringue dessert. It was about this big. I'd do it with egg whites. And she said for a cake that big, 16 cups of white sugar. And then whipped cream and fruit on top. That was the dessert. She said, "I believe I was feeding my cancer with these sugary desserts." She said, "I did not realize." So she came to our program, she went home and she diligently kept to the program. After 6 weeks of no fruit, she went on to the stage 1 antifungal diet, which now she could have some grapefruit, Granny Smith apples. and a little bit of sourdough spelt bread. After 2 months on that, she could go to stage 2 of the antifungal diet, which now includes berries, which are very low GI, and a little bit more carbohydrate. At first, very little carbohydrate. She went back to the doctor after 6 months. He tested her, did blood tests. He said, keep doing what you're doing and come back in 6 months. Now, what did he say to her the first time? You got to have chemo immediately. This is fast growing. So the next time she went back was about a year after her first visit. And the doctor said, I don't understand this, but one of your tumours is totally gone. I think it was 6 months later, the other tumour had totally gone. She said, when I go to see the doctor today, the oncologist, the specialist, the doctors are there and they just look at her. They don't understand what's happening to her. They said, the last tumour is still there, but it's not doing anything. So he said, we're not even worrying about it. She said, my sleep apnea's improved. My blood pressure's come down. She said, the bone spurs on my knees are gone. She said, all these other things have healed. Can you do a bicarbonate poultice on the breast? It's worth a try, but we have found the most effective is the castor oil, just straight castor oil. And the same compress can be used again and again. If the breast is open and it gets a little contaminated with leakages, that would need to be changed often. But putting it in the sun is a wonderful healer. So we had another man attend our program and he had prostate cancer. He was not really interested in being at our retreat. He was 57, but he did not like what the doctors were offering. He came with his wife, who was also in her mid-50s, and daughter, who was about 30. And his wife and daughter were ultra keen. And as we consulted together, I always offer, I said, well, you have a choice. You can do the hyperbaric chambers, you can do the wraps. In fact, if you choose, it's a little extra. You can have a hyperbaric every day, you can have a wrap every day. So I always give the person the choice. And the green drinks, and his wife and daughter said, he'll do it. So every green drink we gave him, he looked at it, and his wife and daughter, yes, he'll do it. So he had this cheer club behind him, which were constantly pushing him along, and he was righto. And as he was going home, we said, we told him how to, the no fruit for 6 weeks, and then the stage 1 for 2 months, stage 2 indefinitely. Stay on the stage 2 until you get the all clear. He said, righto. And his wife was going to make the suppositories. 3 months later, he emailed us. He said, I've just had a test and I'm cancer-free. Now he's interested. I thought it was an interesting case because I think it is important as part of your treatment to have faith in the body, to have faith in God and his ability to heal when we give the body the right conditions. When someone comes to us with cancer, we say to them, we see 3 outcomes. Sometimes we see a total turnaround. In fact, we've had people come and do our program that have said to us, I'm here because my friend came and now they're cancer-free, and we didn't even hear about that one. So sometimes we see turnarounds. Sometimes we see 6 months go to 6 years. And sometimes we see the last days made more comfortable. Because sometimes when people come, it's in a very advanced stage. But we've had a few people come at that stage, and in a couple of months they have passed, and their wife or their husband or relative contacts us and they say, thank you so much. They died with dignity. The simple natural treatments brought them relief and allowed them to die peacefully. And that's why I said to this woman I mentioned previously, she was on chemo for palliative care. I said, that's not palliative care. Palliative care is making the last days made more comfortable. So no matter what stage, as you can see, the natural treatments are always of benefit. Sometimes it's doing poultices as well. One always has to look at the person. Sometimes they've had constipation for 20 years, going once a day to the toilet. So that has to be addressed. So it all depends on where it is. It all depends on what type it is. Depends on the person, depends on what they can do. My husband I was talking to him yesterday, he said we had a man come and he was at such advanced stages, he couldn't, everything he ate, he threw up, he couldn't drink what can we do? And that's what we say, we are not a hospital. We are actually a teaching institution, teaching people how to look after their bodies. And so I tell you these stories as encouragements. I tell you these stories to show you that we live in an incredible body with an inbuilt ability to heal itself. Sometimes people will come and I'll think, I don't know whether they're going to make it. And I hear a year later that they're healed. And then some people will come and I think they're young, they're keen, they've got a pretty good chance, and then I hear that they've passed. And I remember one case in detail, this woman, what she didn't do to conquer her breast cancer, and yet she passed. And then we discovered that her mother was a nurse, her father was a pastor. They were in Africa when she was a little girl working, and so they left her with some local people who'd winded her, and they did terrible things to this little girl. Things that she could not even describe to me, and I didn't expect her to. And she knew that her parents would be mortified to know that that's what had happened to their little girl. So she never told them. So she held this terrible secret for many, many years, and I believe the emotional aspects of that is what eventually took her life at the age of 42, which one would consider was very young. So the emotional aspect has to be looked at it. So we had a man named Doug who had prostate cancer. He was with us for 2 weeks. And in the first consultation, I said, did you have a happy, healthy childhood? He said, my father yelled at me every day of my life. And he started to get quite irate about it. So I moved on, because I knew that he would hear the lecture similar to what I gave yesterday on the power of forgiveness. I saw him the next day. I said, Doug, have you forgiven your father? He said, you don't understand. He yelled at me every day of my life. I said, I appreciate that must have been very difficult. But I said, Doug, you are relating it every day. And the tragedy is that experience can get bigger than it really is. It's time to forgive, because forgiveness cuts the chains that bind you to painful past. He said, you don't understand? I said, Doug, it only takes a minute. So I left. 2 minutes later, he said, I've done it. I said, congratulations, Doug. You see, it's a prefrontal cortex decision. If you wait till you feel like it, you won't do it. The feeling goes too deep. It's too painful. Just do it. And it's a law of the mind that our words affect our feelings. And what I found that every day, the smile got bigger on Doug's face. And that second week, we saw a different man. He stopped relating the story. Because the fact is, when we go to bed early, the lymphatic system in our brain cleans up the thorns that develop from holding on to the heartache. Forgiveness has a physiological effect to free the system from this painful past. We never forget, but it needn't be part of our everyday life. Emma shared with you some of her pain. You can imagine as a mother the pain. You want to touch the mother, you touch her daughter. I found freedom through forgiveness. Emma found freedom through forgiveness. Just do it. And if you're finding it hard, we serve a great God of heaven that is able to give you the power to forgive. Every day we saw a different Doug. No longer did he relate his painful past. He had found freedom through forgiveness. And it was at that point we started to see healing in Doug. Even though he was doing all of this, if he was going to hold on to that painful past, it would eat him like a cancer. In the book Ministry of Healing, there's a chapter called Mind Cure, and it says grief, anxiety, discontent, remorse, guilt, distrust all tend to break down the life forces and invite decay and death into the body. And yet freedom can be found through forgiveness. Forgiveness is the one thing that will cut that painful past. And I think many you will find have found this. There are whole books written on this, radical forgiveness, the power of forgiveness. And that beautiful little book, I think there are some out there called Steps to Christ. It's only a tiny little book, but there's a whole chapter in there on the power of forgiveness. Just do it. It gets easier. It's a decision. And remember, your words will affect your feelings. I have been unable to touch on every aspect in this short hour that we have together, but my aim was to show you that there is hope even for such a serious illness as cancer. And my book, Self-Heal by Design, it goes into a little bit more detail in the fungus link with disease. It quotes all the books and more that I mentioned in this lecture, so you can search them out. And it also gives daily programs on how you can implement this and the herbs that you can use. So before we close, we can take a couple of questions on the subject. Yes?
The fungus mushrooms are a fungus, but we eat them all the time. Are they inappropriate?
So the question is, what about mushrooms? If you have a fungal problem in your body, if you have cancer in your body, ideally no mushrooms until you're healed. And in my book, I've got a chapter called The Stomach's Secret Weapon, Hydrochloric Acid. Because if the hydrochloric acid is strong, it does kill off fungus yeast in the body. So that's another aspect, is building that, yes? Pardon? Prostate cancer in men, then balancing the hormones and the suppositories that we talked about, the castor oil suppositories. Well, where do you put it? And that's why I mentioned the suppositories, because the colon wall is the closest to the prostate. So that's why the suppositories you put in at night, then the castor oil goes across straight into the prostate gland. Yes? Genetics loads the gun, lifestyle pulls the trigger. Is that my quote? It's actually not my quote, but if you put that in, it'll say it is Barbara O'Neill's quote. I certainly do use it. I read it and I thought that makes sense because I have found that to be true. Yeah? What about skin cancer? I have a book that's about to be printed called Sustain Me. And the Sustain Me is the acronym that I have chosen to illustrate the laws of health. And in that book, there will be a chapter on the skin. But very briefly, there are 3 ways that you can conquer skin cancer. There's a very quick way, and that's to apply the black salve or the cansema. And it's a black ointment, and you apply it once, cover the area, and don't touch it for 24 hours, then you take it off. And if it is cancer, there will be a reaction. It'll be red with a pussy top. Don't worry, that's exactly what the herb's doing. After 10 days, it slowly shrinks up, and then the core will fall out. You'll be left with a crater, a hole, but usually over the next month or so, that fills out, and you can put a drop of castor oil on it every day. That's the quick way to get rid of skin cancer. The next way, which is not quite as quick but still effective, you put 1 drop of oregano, you call it oregano, 1 drop on the skin cancer every morning, and that will take maybe 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks. It'll sting, but after usually about a month, then it falls off. The very slow way, and this might take 6 months, is to apply castor oil twice a day. Yeah. Skin tag, you can try castor oil, but consistency is the key with castor oil because it works little by little by little. Yeah. How do men balance hormones? In my hormone lecture, I told you how men do it. They apply it twice a day with the yam cream. Yeah. That's right. With the black salve or the cansema, it's just you apply a very tiny amount. You apply too much, you might get too much of a reaction, and that can be very painful. Yeah. How do you know what your hydrochloric acid's like? If you're digesting your meal very quickly, you've got good hydrochloric acid. If it's 5 hours since you've eaten and you feel like you've only just eaten, that's an indicator that you've got low hydrochloric acid. If you've got low hydrochloric acid, often you get bloating. The food's not breaking down properly. Where do you get the black salve? You can Google it. Pardon? Didn't hear that. How do you what? Cansema. Yeah? About Haven of Hope. I'm from Australia. I don't know much about Haven of Hope. So you'll have to contact Emma on Misty Mountain, USA to find out more of that. So with the cansema, you apply it once. That's it, once. 3 months later, if it still looks like there might be something there, then you might apply it again, but once. Yeah? Can you use the black salve on moles? Yeah, you can. You know, if nothing happens, it's an indication that it's not cancer. Yes? How does earmuffs, EMFs, oh, they feed it very nicely by disrupting the electromagnetic field in our bodies. It's called the silent killer. Yes? Grounding. Yeah, grounding, it's a good idea to walk barefoot on the grass. That helps you ground. What about the sheets? If you are in touch with technology every day because it's your work, I think it's important to go to a little bit more effort to go the grounding. But if you don't have a lot of exposure to electromagnetic field, it's not that big a deal. If you sit next to a router every single day, you've got to take steps to do something. We'll just take 2 more questions. Yeah? How do you eliminate parasites with children? You've got to get the dogs out of the house. You've got to teach the children to wash their hands when they come into the house, and also give them a quarter of a cup of pumpkin seeds as the first thing they eat at breakfast time. And also you can get tinctures or tablets that have got black walnut and wormwood in them. And also when you make a avocado dip, put lots of crushed garlic in it. And often children will eat sourdough, like your simple needs toast, olive oil, crushed garlic on that, avocado and tomato. Often children will eat the raw avocado like that. So last question, yes? So to clean the mold in the house, you first clean it with white vinegar, and then you can wipe it over with clove essential oil. But then you've got to find out why it's there, because there should be no mold in the house. You know, you've got proper ventilation, check that there are no leaking taps, no leaking pipes. So you've got to address all that. So I'd like to thank you for your attention.